Hi everyone, my name is Yeganeh Alimohammadi, and I'm a final year PhD student at Stanford University in the Management Science and Engineering, advised by Amin Sabari. And today I'm going to talk to you about a project that I did last summer during my internship at Google with Aranyak, Mehta, and Perlroth. And it's about incentive compatibility in the auto bidding world. But what is auto bidding in the first place? First, imagine I have a valuable item for sale and all of your advertisers. In a traditional auction, I would inform you about the auction rule, and you would have the freedom to decide how much you're willing to bid on this query. You might even use your knowledge of classic mechanism design literature to choose the optimal bid. Now let's take a leap forward. Instead of just one anti-query, let's say I have millions of them. It would have been nearly impossible for each of you to individually bid on all of these queries. Even if I categorize them in a specific keyword, as I did here, then it's still a hard optimization function. And this is where auto bidding comes into place. Auto bidding is a feature that comes between the advertisers and the auction. Advertisers, instead of bidding on the keywords, they would just provide their high-level goals and constraints. And then the auto bidder would bid on behalf of them to find the optimal bids. Then the auction takes place, meaning that it allocates the queries to the advertisers based on their auto bidder bids and also asks them for payments. So this is very different from the classic auctions design. And you can ask a lot of the fundamental questions you would ask before. Today, specifically, I try to answer the following question. Should you misreport your constraint to the auto bidder, or should you provide accurate information? Let's say you are an advertiser with a specific budget. Should you report a lower budget or just report the true budget or not? This is very similar to the literature of truthfulness in the classic auction design. To try to answer to this question, let me first define the auto bidding model more specifically. So we modeled auto bidding as a two-stage game. The first step, advertisers report their constraints, such as their budget, and they can be strategic in this step. The second step, auto bidding agents bid in the auctions on behalf of them. And for bidding, they are kind of solving an optimization program, which is in a simplified version is shown here. Note that in these optimizations, the goal is to maximize total value of the advertiser. And then the constraint, if, for example, the advertiser has reported the budget, is that the total payment is less than the budget. The advertiser could report different kind of constraint known as target cost per acquisition, or short TCPA, which in that case, the constraint is that the total payment of the advertiser over the total value is less than this TCPA constraint. Note that the payment part of this optimization function depends on all the other auto bidders in the system. So we assume in this stage 2 of the game, the auto bidders reach to an equilibrium between themselves. Also note that there is a main difference with the classic auctions, which is the maximizing total value part. In classic settings, usually we assume that the advertisers are utility maximizers, but what actually has been implemented is that in auto bidding features that we are assuming advertisers are value maximizers instead. So the goal here is in practice different, and that's what motivated us to model it in this way. The main assumption here is that the value of advertiser for each query is public, which we are assuming in a sense that is inferred from historical data. And that the targets and budgets are private, and it's the part that the advertiser are being strategic about it. And these are the main differences with classic auctions, which actually inherently come with the new features of auto bidding. Now, with this model in hand, let me be specific about auto bidding incentive compatibility, or in short, AIC, which we define. So in eye of an advertiser, the whole auto bidding setting is like a black box. The advertiser doesn't care about how the auto bidder is solving the optimization or not. They just care about what they're reporting to this black box and what they're getting as the value out of it. So with this in mind, we define the concept of auto bidding incentive compatibility, or in short, AIC, as follows. We say auction rule is AIC when advertisers are better off reporting their constraint rather than lowering them. So in any equilibrium between the auto bidders, advertiser would, for example, report the true budget. Now with this definition of AIC, let me show you our result. We looked at different kinds of auction and see whether they are AIC or not. In second price auction, or more generally truthful auctions, and first price auction, we showed that the auction rules are not AIC, meaning that there are examples such that the advertisers have incentive to misreport their constraints. In this last part, like first price auction with uniform bidding, we are assuming the auto bidder are constrained to pacing equilibrium or uniform bidding strategy, which means that each auto bidder has just one multiplier per advertiser and has to bid by the product of that multiplier times the value of that advertiser for the query. So it's a constrained set of auctions compared to the whole first price auction. The main ingredient of the proofs is a continuous query model that enables characterizing the best response of these auto bidders. And under that, we can see whether auction rules are AIC or not. So with that, let me actually tell you where does our work stand in the literature of auto bidding. One line of research focuses on the mechanism design approaches. This kind of a study has some kind of assumption about available information that allows them to disregard this like presence of auto bidding intermediaries. There is also a second line of work, which actually looks at the interaction between the auto bidders after the constraints are submitted and the auction. And in this case, there are usually like studies on the price of anarchy and the efficiency of the system. Then our paper is actually on a different side of these interactions. We study the interaction of the advertisers and the whole body of auto bidding. In a similar spread, Columbus and Nissan has studied incentive compatibility in a reinforcement learning setting, where we have a single query and the agents are regret minimizing. And in this case, they show that second price auction is not incentive compatible, whereas first price auction is. And in a sense, we are complementing the result by looking at more general set of queries instead of just one query. Also, after our work, there has been other studies looking at the gain between advertisers and the whole auto bidding setting. In the rest of the talk, I will start with a warm-up example showing you how second price auction is not AIC. And then I go to an overview of how first price auction is not AIC, and then like conclude with future questions. The example for second price auction is very simple. It just has 2 advertisers and 4 queries. And the 2 advertisers have budgets, which are shown here. The first one with $20 and the second one with $40. And the values for each queries are actually shown in this table. Now let's see how does the auto bidding work here. In general, it might be a very hard problem to find 8 different kind of bids for all these advertisers. But there has been previous works that show that for general truthful auctions, the auto bidders' optimal bidding strategy is uniform bidding, meaning that for each advertiser, there is a multiplier, and the bidding of the auto bidding is just the product of that multiplier times the actual value, which is shown here in this table. Then now for each advertiser, now we just have one variable that we have to optimize. And that's actually an easier problem, which I've done it for you, which leads to this equilibrium that the first advertiser gets the 2 queries and the second advertiser gets the other 2 queries. Let's say now the first advertiser is asking, what if I lower my budget? Note that previously, like in classic auctions, when one advertiser lowered their budget, the bids of the other advertiser remains the same. But this is not the case for auto bidding, because the auto bidders are interacting with each other, and the corresponding auto bidder of the second advertiser can respond to whatever the other auto bidder is doing in real time. So I'm not going through the detail of how the example works, but trust me, in this setting, when the first advertiser has lowered their budget, it gets more queries because their auto bidder turns out to bid more aggressively. And then as a result, the second price auction is not AIC with this simple example. One thing that you might want to note is that in this example, the order that the two advertisers have for the queries are kind of reverse of each other. The first query has low values for both, but the rest of them, first advertiser values the tacos more than the shopping cart, more than the shoes, which is the reverse for the second advertiser. This is actually what we formalize. We give conditions that make the second price auction or more general, truthful, and first price auctions become auto bidding incentive compatible. These constraints suggest that in situations where every query sees intense competition between the advertiser, there is less incentive for an advertiser to misreport their constraints. Now let me go to the first price auction. The best response strategy that I was telling you under second price is easy is not the same for first price auction. Because in a sense, the first price auction becomes like a knapsack problem, meaning that, for example, when I have a given budget and when the bids of the other advertisers are known, then each item has a value and a price, and I want to maximize my value with this given budget that I have. This is in general known to be a hard problem in computer science, but at the same time, it's a tractable problem if we assume the values are continuous. And the way that it works is that we can sort everything by value over price and just greedily pick them until we hit the budget. This is why we're inspired to look at the continuum of queries instead of discrete queries in this setting. And using a continuous set of queries, we can show that the best response strategies of the auto bidders become tractable. And it's as before, we have to only look at uniform bidding. So for per advertiser, there is just one variable, which is the threshold that defines this value over price that we have to track. Using the continuous query model, we can characterize the first price auction's equilibrium, the equilibrium between the auto bidders. So here we find some function of advertiser's value that with that, the equilibrium between the auto bidders becomes a reverse function of the ratio of the budgets. Or if there were TCPA constraints, it would be like the ratio of a TCPA constraint. This function, I have hidden the details of it under the rug, but it's just a function of the different valuation functions that the advertisers have. Then there is a second part, which we show that when this function is monotone in terms of the bidding strategy of the advertisers, then the resulting auction is AIC. So to find an example of advertisers such that the resulting first price auction is not AIC, we should just play with this function f to make it non-monotone. And with that, we actually showed an example which makes first price auction not AIC. But further, this monotonicity condition leads us to ways to define sufficient condition for valuation functions that make the auction AIC. And the kind of sufficient condition, for example, can be that when f has a monotone hazard rate, which works for both first price and truthful auctions in general. So as a recap, the main takeaways is that the second price auction and more general truthful auctions, first price auctions are not AIC when we consider auto bidding first. And when we have first price auctions constrained to uniform bidding, then it becomes AIC. And as for the open questions, we can ask whether real world advertisers' value satisfies the AIC constraints or not. And can we design auction rules where auto bidding using this auction rule become always AIC, no matter what are the valuation functions of the advertisers are, and can be used continuous querying model to design more efficient auctions from them. And with that, I thank you. And feel free to email me if you have any questions. And here is the QR code to my website. Thank you so much for listening.